skin and its derivatives. And homeostasis, just know the definition: maintenance of body's internal environment within narrow limits. Narrow limits is that the classic example is 7.35 to 7.45 for blood. Know that stat. But also 98.6 can vary a few tenths of a degree. That's body temperature is another great example of homeostasis. An internal environment does not include cytoplasm, it's blood, lymph, and tissue fluid. That's why they're related. When we talk about the escaped blood becomes tissue fluid, then it becomes lymph, then it returns back to the blood. That's the function of lymphatic system. But the three major body fluids are the internal environment, and they are specifically blood, lymph, tissue fluid. Blood, lymph, and tissue fluid are the internal environment, but you know the note, intracellular fluid is not, because cells have autonomy. Cells control their own internal environment. Okay, then, hold on. I just have to do two things, and we're done. The next, lesson 1 and then lesson 2, regions of the body, but you don't need to know any of those. Okay, forget about all the regional terms. We had them under bones and everything. Okay, so just know this. A section that divides body into left and right portion, sagittal. Just the three definitions. Forget about mid-sagittal. It just divides the body, a cut or section that divides into left and right portions, sagittal. A cut that divides into anterior and posterior, coronal. A cut that divides into anterior and posterior is coronal, and a cut that divides into superior and inferior is transverse. Just know that. That's it. And then directional terms are built into all the questions. Don't worry, they're not going to be separate questions on those. And lastly, body cavities. All you need to know. Dorsal cavity houses brain and spinal cord. I'm being very concise. Just know dorsal cavity has a cranial cavity for the brain and a spinal or vertebral canal for the spinal cord. So overall, dorsal cavity houses brain and spinal cord. Nothing else, but they're important. Dorsal cavity is more posterior, houses brain and spinal cord. Ventral cavity is more anterior or ventral, and it houses all the other visceral organs, before I get specific. So the ventral cavity consists of the upper thoracic and lower abdominal pelvic. Ventral is the upper portion is thoracic and lower portion abdominal pelvic. And what's the boundary separating thoracic and abdominal pelvic? Diaphragm. Then the ventral just houses, houses lungs, heart, and liver, spleen, gallbladder, small intestine, large intestine, stomach, etc. But specifically, thoracic houses, if they ask thoracic, it's lungs and heart. If they ask thoracic, it's both plurals and mediastinum houses. If they just say what is contained in the thoracic cavity, it's lungs and heart. If they say what's housed in the mediastinum or mediastinum, it's only heart. So if it's just thoracic, it's lungs and heart, but if it's mediastinum, it's only heart. But if they ask abdominal pelvic, which they almost never do, then it would be stomach, spleen. We haven't done those organs, but stomach, spleen, gallbladder, everything but lungs and heart. It's all the visceral organs but lungs and heart if they ask abdominal pelvic. If they ask ventral, it's everything, lungs, heart, and everything else. But more typically, they ask either thoracic, and the answer is lungs and heart, or mediastinum, the answer is heart only. Okay, and don't worry about pericardial or and that's actually now